You are now tuned in to the Chop Shop with your host, Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr. Let's chop it up.
What's up? What's up? What's up, my viewing and listening audience? Listen, I'm excited as always that God gives us the privilege to be able to bring you the Chop Shop. I'm your host, Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr. And listen, tonight, y'all, we gonna be talking, and we gonna be hearing the fullness, the other side of the story. You stay tuned in, and you gonna know what that means. I know you've seen it if you read it in our heading on the post. But tonight is the night where we're going to be able to show that the Chop Shop is not partial. It's not partisan. We're a God show, man. And the government should be upon his shoulders. So tonight we're going to hear from one of my good brothers. But before we get to that, I got to bring on my right hand and my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts on the ones and twos. Always making the magic happen behind the scenes. Technique 1200s because nothing else will do. And Shaka, I have made the decision that this segment is always going to be called the good news because, man, I got some awesome news tonight. My main man, my friend and my brother, Pastor Andre Nance, a little more than a week ago, had a real health scare, man, that required him to go into open heart surgery. But that brother walked up out the hospital giving God glory.
Talk.
Man, listen, there's some people that just get put in your life, right? And when they get put into your life, no matter what the circumstances that bring them, it's like an instant connection. And that's who Pastor Andre and Lady Nakia Nance has been in my life, man. And I love them so much to the degree, man, that I was on my face. If I ain't learned nothing else from my mama, that is how to pray for healing. And man, to see that brother walk up out of there and he got strength and he's still committed and gonna do the work of the Lord, man. That's the good news. My brother dealt another blow to the devil. And healing is still his testimony. Pastor Andre Nance, man, we love you and we shout you out tonight for being the picture and the image of strength and faith. All that you've sown into all other people as you've prayed and believed God and taught the word of God. We just see God being faithful to what his promise is in your life. He said children is the healing is the children's bread. And I'm excited tonight to be able to deliver the good news. That my good friend, we're going to get Pastor Nance on here in a few weeks, man. Pastor Nance, one of them guys, I bring him on here. We're going to wind up having a Holy Ghost good time. I get Pastor on here. It's going to be like a Kojic church service, man. He is so intelligent. He don't play about the word of God. He mean what he says. Say what he mean. But he get on here. It's going to be churchy, man. I'm telling you now. New Mount Sinai, y'all got a gem. I love that brother. To God be the glory, great things he is doing. Let's get to these church announcements.
That's what's up, man. You got to acknowledge. You got to acknowledge and evangelize. You got to do both of those things.
Listen, acknowledge man, and evangelize. I got healing all around me, man. I'm talking about my producer. My producer just beats on cancer like cancer. Why you keep coming back? Take this.
Listen. This ain't for you. This ain't for you.
Yo, this ain't what you want. You don't want the smoke.
I'm trying to tell you.
Man, we serve an awesome God. That's all I can say. The Stop the Beef hotline has been going now. And y'all, listen, I was literally in a meeting today where the places in Baltimore where the Men of the We Are Us movement is working. Let me tell y'all what they're not telling y'all. Somebody might tell you that it's still 200 homicides, but the truth is in the Western District where I serve diligently and vigilantly, homicides are down 38%, and non-fatal shootings are down 28% from this time last year. So the work is working. The message is getting out there. People are not wanting to continue to have bloodshed in their communities. And the Stop the Beef hotline is a big part of that component. Call the number 443-431-3705 or 443-522-7848. As somebody on the other end of that line, a strong black man is going to answer, and then the Men of the We Are Us movement are going to come out to make sure that whatever needs to happen to preserve life happens. We are us. We all we got. We all we need. Walking hand in hand with the Stop the Beef hotline is the Baltimore Peace Agreement. That's right, y'all. We got together with brothers behind the walls, brothers that's in the street, OGs, people that's been there, done that, people on the side of righteousness, men of faith, and we came up with this 10-point peace agreement. And everybody that's signing off on it is simply saying that even if I got to eat in the streets, I ain't got to die or kill in the streets. So if we have not come to your community, give us a call and we'll be right there to bring the peace agreement to you. The Employee Baltimore show every Thursday. I got to update this because we got a new logo for the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. Every other Thursday, if you tune in, you'll see yours truly bringing you the finest and up-to-date employment information. Y'all know they call me the plug. I work with businesses as a result of the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, and the goal is one thing, for us to build a workforce system that really, really works. Partnering with Yo Baltimore, come on through my 18 to 24. We got something for you too. Victory House Worship Center, the place where I'm humbled and blessed to pastor. God's word is going forth, the growth, the development, and everything that you expect to see where the word of God is being sown with integrity is happening in the place. So if you're looking for a place to come where you can fellowship and ultimately the bigger picture, give God the glory, come on, hang out with us at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, 1063 West Fair Street. There's a back to school bash or two going on this Saturday, and I'm not selfish, so I still want to shout out the great work that my brothers in the We Are Us men's movement is going to be doing. This Saturday, they're going to be at 3718 West Belvedere Avenue. It's our headquarters location, one of the places where we've sat the movement down. We got some partners, Heal America, New Vision, Positive Impact, and we're going to be out there. Free food, free school supplies, free resources. And if I know We Are Us, like I know We Are Us, you might even have a local Baltimore entertainer or two come through. So you want to make sure that if you're on that northwest end, you stop through 3718 West Belvedere. And then here it is. 4 years ago, God blessed me to begin to plant this back to school event in West Baltimore, in the neighborhood, in the community where I love. Lexington Terrace is what it was called when I was a kid, and now it's been broken up into 5 communities: Callaway Road, Poe Homes, Poppleton Place, Vintage Gardens, and where my heritage is, the towns at the terraces. And we're going to have free school supplies, refreshments, food. We're going to have all kinds of resources out there. This year, we were partnered with Dynamic Healthcare, and this particular flyer don't show it, but my brothers from the Lexington Terrace Project, the LT9, came together, and we're doing it bigger this year than we ever have. Every year it's grown. Come on out, bring the kids. It's not exclusive to a neighborhood, and we have enough resources to bless you, even if you're not from down the way. So make sure you come through and get your blessing. My man, Overseer Clay Burston, is having the Arts and Worship Revival. They coming down the stretch. They got 2 more, and one of them is my big little brother, Elder Terrence Herbert. If you want to talk about a man of God of excellence, a man who has some integrity, who loves God, and who just does things the right way, this is my brother, Elder Terrence Herbert. If you are available on the 28th of August, I want you to come through. Make sure you show some support, and you better not miss September the 4th, where my big brother, Pastor John Watts, I think he's now overseer or Bishop-elect John Watts, is going to be coming through and bringing the word. These are some pastors that love God, that flows in the arts and the prophetic, so you will not want to miss this great move of God. If you know Mission Life way back in the Manhattan days, they were a worship-driven church that always had awesome music ministry, and they did everything in excellence and to the glory of God. So now that we've gotten all of that out the way, we want to move on now, and I'm excited. This brother and I got to know each other through Facebook, and I do call and consider him a brother. And we were, y'all know that there was a time when I was really, really vocal about my views concerning many things, including politics. And this brother, with his humility, which is one of my favorite things about him, would not confront me, but he would reach out to me, and we would have conversations about things that, because I was seeing it the way that I saw it, didn't really press me to look at the bigger picture. And as I began to look at the bigger picture, I grew a liking and a love for this brother. There are many people that try to jump on your posts and want to go to war and all that sort of thing. He just does it in love. I honor God tonight to finally have him on, because we talked about him coming on for a while. And I'm talking about the one and only, the great Pastor Tim Walters. Man, thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, you just blessed me. I don't know how to come back from that, but I love you, brother. This has been a long time coming, and I'm a big fan of Facebook. When you treat it right, these things happen, and it's a powerful ministry tool to bring the right people together.
Man, when you were doing your prayer, I think it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it came on, at that back when you were doing
Yep.
that regularly, that was the time that I would go to the track. So literally while I would be out on the track walking, I would literally have the prayer going on and I would be listening to that, man. I just, I thank God for the relationships that he blesses me with, because diversity hasn't always been a big part of my life. I grew up in the projects. Everybody around me looked like me, thought like me, functioned and flowed like me. And as I've gotten later in life, there's just been some places that God has taken me to open me up to new people that do things different than me. And one of the things that I love about that is we still see the same God in the midst of that diversity. So it's an honor for me to call you brother, man.
And the same back again, long time coming. And I love the way you approach things, because in the end, my mission in life since COVID started was to stop the division. For Christians, Christ unites us. Scripture is clear. There is no color. There's no Jew, Gentile. It's us in this thing together.
Yes,
and
sir.
So we got to fight the world together. And it's okay, because we do have differences. We just got to honor them.
And we gonna jump right out the frying pan into the fire tonight, because the thing that particularly brought about this conversation was, I don't know if I posted something about the election results, and it wasn't one way or another, because if anybody knows me, they know that when it comes down specifically to this platform, it's not about partisanship. And you said something to me. You sent me a nice Tim Walters type of loving message, that you had actually, while there's been such a push on the side of the world where I dwell, mostly around Westmore and all of those kinds of things, the Democratic Party, you came and you said, hey, brother, listen, I would like to talk to you, because I've had opportunity to pray with Dan Cox. I know him, and not that you're here today to advocate or to push his message, but there's a side of the story that we all need to understand. So I got you here tonight because we've been doing this post-election thing really since the election, because we've had so many great contributors. And I wanted to be able to have the conversation with you tonight about what we don't know, what we're not hearing, if we're locked into a partisan approach to this upcoming gubernatorial election. So we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. We're going to talk about all the candidates, right? And we're going to talk about it, but I know that you're going to be coming from a more conservative perspective. So when you saw the results of the gubernatorial election, specifically on the Republican side, was it a shock to you that Dan Cox was able to outpace Ms. Schultz?
No, not at all. Not at all. He worked tirelessly in the state. And when you actually talk to him, you can connect with him. And there was just within the Republican Party. And by the way, for the record, I'm an independent.
Me too.
I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian constitutionalist conservative in that order. And so there was just such a swell of rage, is probably the only way to say it, over what has happened in the last 2 years. And as a conservative, I've been extremely vocal about this Republican Party and this Republican governor and the way they performed tyrannically in full, from my position over the last 2 years. So
you're talking about the sitting governor, Governor Hogan.
Correct. And so Delegate Cox, he came, I had the great fortune to come together with a small group of people in April of 20, and we started Reopen Maryland. And the only delegate that initially stood with us was Delegate Cox. And we ended up with a few more. But by and large, there was silence on both, and this is both sides. This was freedom, a nonpartisan issue. And he's the only one that stood with us. And so I've come to know him well through that. I've testified on behalf of his legislation to include impeaching this governor and to try to correct the laws that are being taken advantage of to candidly abuse us and our freedoms.
So since you brought it up, let's go back 2 years ago to Reopen Maryland. That was something that I had the great pleasure of you taking really, really, really in that time to talk to me about, because, I'm a sponge, man. I want to hear, what we're talking about. And I want our listening audience to really put your listening ears there. We do have a means for you to be able to talk your talk. If you want to, go ahead, get in the comments section, because we don't silence or censor anybody here on the Chop Shop. But talk to us about Reopen Maryland, and we're going back to COVID. When we were in COVID, and bring us to where we were when Reopen Maryland launched.
Yeah, so I mean, in the beginning, this came out of nowhere, rattled everyone. But again, the media jumped on this, and it was fairly incredible. And so, without really knowing, I think everybody was in, okay, the governor's asking for 2 weeks. All right, given how little we know at this time, which in and of itself should have been appalling, I think by and large, most of us were okay. But when you look at the data at the time, it just kind of didn't add up. But again, we're citizens. We don't get to see it all. Maybe something else is there. Well, in fact, nothing else was there. This was just a bad time. And so after the 2 weeks, which was unprecedented, I lost my mind personally when he shut down the church. This is about as unconstitutional, as un-American as you can get. At a time when people needed the most hope, that's where you go to. And so that's kind of why I started doing those Facebook pieces, because I was watching in my Facebook sphere Christians start to rail at each other. And it was more the pro-shutdown folks about those who wanted to take their own risks and meet. Now, Hebrews 10, verse 25 is very clear. We're called to meet in fellowship, not online. We're called, and for very specific reasons. And so for about 2 weeks, my Captain America got ahead of my Christian, and it was just, I was kind of lost. And then somebody took me up and said, hey, this isn't you. And and then it's like, okay, I have a mission. God's given me a purpose. Let's begin to pull together scripture. Let's just talk these things through. I'm a research junkie, so I was looking at these things. I have a background in this area through the military. And so I was able to start to pull, this is what it works, and this is what's happening, and this shouldn't be happening. And so in that, a group of some people stumbled upon each other, and we decided to begin to have our voices heard. It was a fight in the early days because, again, the Trump people, they were trying to turn these into Trump rallies, and we fought really hard to keep these nonpartisan. Because
I remember that part.
Yeah, it's a nonpartisan issue. This isn't a Trump rally. I appreciate your zeal. And again, in full disclosure to your viewers, I was a Trump delegate in 2015. And again, I would not vote for him again. Not because of anything, one particular thing. His day is come and gone, and we just need to move on. We got to get past the division in this nation. And so my goal in that time was to be heard, but provide a safe space where people could actually find others that felt the way they did, because it was pretty brutal in those early days. And in fact, when I got COVID, not a lot of people had it yet. My whole family got it, and I had it fairly bad. And the governor, the local paper in Anne Arundel County did a hit piece on me. And so the governor picked it up, and he ran this for 4 or 5 times a day for like 12 days as a private citizen. And my whole family across the country got death threats for months. So the partisan piece of this was horrendous. So Rashawn, let me answer that. I'm going to get.
That's going to jump us a little ahead of the conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that part. I'm going to get to that, my friend.
Yeah, we definitely going to get to that part.
Yep. And so that's kind of where we're at. And that then set me into this Facebook realm doing these pieces that then somebody said, why don't you do this regularly? So for 2.5 years, I've literally worked through the New Testament, 1 chapter a day, breaking it down theologically, historically, culturally, again, and how it applies to today. And so it's been a fascinating journey that only God could foresee. And I now, looking backwards after 2.5 years, I think COVID was a blessing.
We call it the plandemic now, because there definitely was a lot of things that took place that caused us to thrive and to grow in that space.
Amen.
And if you really get into your word, you'll kind of see it as that as well. But we're going to move forward now, because here we are. Trump is out. We into the Democratic White House, and we get to this midterm election. And the midterm election, My prayer is always that people take it seriously and that they vote, because there's always been kind of a apathy towards the midterm election, specifically in the area where I serve here in Baltimore City. But we have this gentleman who's running for governor on the Republican side named Dan Cox. And, because of the nature of politics now, you'd be hard pressed to get past the headline to understand who a person or what their platform really is, beyond the fact that he endorsed and supported Trump. And Rashawn, we are definitely going to get to this conversation. So as I said, we had the conversation. You spoke to me, and we didn't really have a conversation around Dan Cox or his platform. You just kind of talked to me as your brother to say, hey, and I said, well, let's bring it on here and let people hear, and let's all have this conversation. Our viewers tonight, and you were all for it. Like, you were not hesitant, not one bit, to come on and have the conversation. We are at a very pivotal place, I believe, when it comes down to what we're looking at. And this gubernatorial election is going to have such great implications on the state of Maryland, like beyond, I believe, what many people think. We're looking at Westmore. We're looking at Dan Cox. Dan Cox as a gubernatorial candidate, were you worried at times, or did you ever consider the idea that he was considered kind of the Trump guy, that would hinder his ability to run effectively in the state of Maryland?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to be quite frank, we have an unelected electorate, or uneducated electorate, that can't get beyond headlines. And so a lot of us on either side, and again, I always chuckle because there's a statement floating around Facebook: the left and the right are the two wings of the same bird. And so I was an independent, and then I ran as a Republican in 14 and 18. And so I saw things that I absolutely loathed. And really, in the end, there's one political class, and they're in it together. And so once they get to the table, they sit at that table together and they work together. And it's not always for either their party or you and I, it's for their careers. Political life was never intended to be a career. It was meant to serve. Well, we're your elected leader. No, you're not our leader. You're an elected representative. And so in a republic, words have meaning, and we're losing the battle of the words, and words are tying us up quite a bit. And so I left the party in 18 and pretty dejected. Some of it with Trump, and candidly here in Maryland. And the reason there was some concern, as I ran in 18, whenever I got asked, hey, do you support Trump? I live in a 2 to 3 to 1 I'm in a blue district. And I love to have those discussions at the door. But the people who asked me if I supported Trump were Republicans. And so Republicans here in Maryland hated him. Contrary to the way they look today, there was a deep schism in this primary. And it was candidly kind of a referendum on Trump to some degree. But Hogan made it that way, not Dan Cox. And so Dan just wants to run. Now, he's not got Hogan's support. Obviously, he tried to impeach him. And so he supported Trump, and we can talk here in a second. As I can't speak to why he did. I can only say why I did, and why I'll probably support Dan. Let's just leave it at that. And it comes back to values. Now, values aren't set for me by the media. They're not set by headlines. My values come through Scripture. And so that's where I always take it. And, and I don't shy from not politics, but governing, and our role as Christians in that. In fact, I'm preaching, I'm finishing up Peace this week. I'm taking a vacation. And when I come back, I'm going to handle why we should be involved in politics and what that looks like. And that's not party driven. That's values driven, based on the fruits of the Spirit, our criteria for overseers and elders. There's all these things. And then the sheer fact that in Genesis, we were created to take dominion over creation,
which is governance.
Absolutely. That includes politics. Isaiah teaches us that God is, our three branches of government come from God: the lawgiver, the judge, and the king. And so these are all biblical concepts, and we have kind of gotten away from that. And
let me ask you this, Tim, because it was a few years ago, through conversations with you and other people, that I realized that in my own maturation, I had a lot of conservative values. For the length of time that I've been a registered voter, I've never been registered to a party. I've always been an independent voter. But I learned that there's this thing that's outside of Democrat or Republican, or outside, let's say specifically the Republican Party, called conservatism. And there are a lot of conservative voters that I guess kind of get looped into the partisanship of Republicanism. Can you talk about the difference between conservative values and the Republican Party?
Absolutely, 100%. So, and I really can't do it well here, but in the end, here's the Republican Party is not to the right of center anymore. I tell people I'm a centralist, and what does that mean? The center of political life in America, outside of anything, is the Constitution. Period. If you're a progressive, then you're going to warp the Constitution this way, and if you're a Republican, in theory, you do it to the right. The reality is the Republicans, as a minority party, have chased the Democrats right and left so far that both parties are to the left now. Conservatives still right to the right. So what does conservatism mean for me? It means social values. It means a man marries a woman. It means there's no confusion who a man and a woman is. It means that life is sacred at all points, whether in the womb or at the end. It means we should do and help. It means that the government isn't empowered by the Constitution to lift somebody up at the expense of others. And so that's conservatism. And so it's a free market sense. Now, there is some control. Some would argue, again, back to abortion, that you're taking the woman's right. And the conservative position is, no, I'm not taking her right. I'm simply saying somebody has to defend the unborn, the preborn. That's a human being. It's the most vulnerable of our society. Now, we can definitely come to the consensus that society is kind of harsh right now. And in minority communities and others that are disenfranchised, it's hard to raise kids. That's where we need to come to consensus and fix this. And so that's kind of conservative. Republicans here in Maryland today, it's hey, listen, Governor Hogan has kind of redefined it as we're a centrist. And we can't do anything here, so we compromise. And that's not ever helpful. I have values that can't be compromised. And as do you. As Christians, we all should. And it's that Christian piece that brings us back together, and why I stay in this arena, because we are the hope of the country. And what I mean by that is we have something that unites and keeps us as common ground that allows us to come back and hopefully have legitimate discussions.
You on Live with the Chop Shop. We come to you every Thursday at 6 p.m. Tonight we are talking to my good friend and brother, Pastor Tim Walters. Y'all, we are having a conversation where we are allowing the other side of the story to come in. And you see Rashawn Jackson, the entire American political system skews right. So let's talk about this, because I'm not here to endorse your views or your values, sure, Pastor Tim. I'm here to give you a platform the same way I would give a platform to any, or have been given platforms for 3 years, almost for everybody to be able to come and bring their views. As we are tonight approaching this conversation, you're looking at Westmore as a candidate, right? Mm-hmm. Why? What is your response to Westmore as a candidate, as a voter here in the state of Maryland?
So I find him problematic for a couple of reasons. Again, it comes back to value. So to Rashawn's question, marriage is a man and a woman. All right. And so I have core values, and one of the first and foremost is the pro-life. Abortion's my number one. You had a great Second Amendment discussion a couple years ago. The Constitution in its totality is another one, to include the right to defend yourself. And so we see an onslaught of morality that just, okay, why can't we have and again, many of us think that the Dan Coxes of the world are trying to create a theological driven government. It's not. It's actually Christ that allows the freedom. It's the fact that this was a Christian nation that allowed the freedom of others to come here and thrive, candidly. Now, is there bad points to this? Sure. We have a horrible blemish in our history with slavery. But again, it's the church that at some points encouraged that, and at others began to fight against it. And it's from the pulpit that these things changed. But in the end, the values are there. So pro-life, Wes Moore's come out, he's a pro-choice. Big government is the other thing from a conservative perspective. When you have big government, you add waste. The government's never lowered the cost of anything. And so we always have a problem. And this is both political parties when they favor this industry or that industry through the tax code or through the tax law, which is violence. It's the sword, or the threat of, so it gets into picking winners. And that's not how we were founded. Going back 2 years ago, Governor Hogan and his administration were choosing to decide who could even work and who couldn't. That was horrific. Who could leave their home and who couldn't. And so I'm not a fan of Wes Moore. I think he's a young guy. I appreciate his service. I'm interested to learn more about him. But from the initial blush, and again, I'm trying to get out of the bias of it. And I'm biased, candidly, because I know Dan Cox and I have supported him. And so,
but that's where I want to hear from. I want to hear from you as a voter to Wes Moore as a candidate, and I'm going to do the same thing when it comes down to Dan Cox as a voter to candidate. So we could, because that's what we've been doing over the last few weeks. We've been talking about candidates from the perspective of being a voter, and whether that's conservative voter, Christian voter, whatever voter you are, I want to hear from you concerning Wes Moore.
So with Wes, particularly, again, it comes down to the big government concept. It comes down to diversity. When we talk about diversity, we live in a country that is dramatically changed, and not necessarily in the good, not necessarily in the bad. And so we need to understand these things. But I'm not a big government proponent. And so that's the first, or actually the second. The abortion piece for me is the first thing. And that affects all of us. As Christians, we're called to protect life. And that is life. The very first person in history that recognized the sovereignty of Jesus was John the Baptist while in the womb. And so, this is an important thing. And any country that slaughters its children from a biblical perspective is just not going to be blessed. And so that's the Christian perspective on that. That's number one. So another great point when it comes to government, and I love the story of Davy Crockett. Years ago, he had initially allowed, I believe it was a Commodore's widow, to receive money from the government as a retirement, just for being the widow. And so he goes out back to Tennessee to work his re-election, and a farmer's out there. And he stops, the farmer ignores him. Finally, they talk. Yes, I know who you are. And he asked him, this is a farmer. Why did you give that widow money? And he said, because it was good. And he said, yeah, but who authorized you to take money from me to give to somebody else? Now, does that happen from a tax perspective, roads, things like that? Sure. Taxes by and large are socialistic in nature, but we can't be doing that. We're the church. We're supposed to do that. What you're doing, what your other speakers are doing, it comes back to us in our communities, not government. Now, does government have a place? 100%. But that is a fundamental piece for me. And he wants more government.
I don't want to ignore our viewers tonight. Shaq, can we start looking at some of the comments and questions that we got up? Because I believe we had, there was the pro-life thing that you talked about. And then you mentioned marriage. Rashawn Jackson asks, is Cox in support of, I think you already answered that, marriage equality for all people? Does he view marriage between a man and a woman? And I think you already answered that he agrees that marriage is an institution between a man and a woman.
Having said that, and again, he needs to address
keep that question right there,
yep.
Shaq.
And so having addressed that, marriage is something that's been kind of skewed by the government. And so it's a church religious faith function, not a government. So when we talk about benefits, that's something, when you talk about civil unions, when the government tied marriage to the tax code, it is set and made people get a license for it. It stepped outside its bounds, candidly. And so government is now in marriage. And so that's where, we really need to look at that. Is it a civil union? I support government civil unions. I simply don't call it a marriage. I
think that's one of the places where people differed, because when I began to see people come out in favor of marriage, that people didn't realize that the issue for many, including myself, was that marriage was God's institution. It was established in the Bible, and it was given this way, that there was no argument as to whether somebody should legally be able to add their partner or their civil union or whatever to. And it seemed to get so caught up in the wash that the government wound up doing. I want to get to some of what's being said now, because there are several of our commenters that are talking about the direct imbalance that it seems to exist. And this isn't a race issue for what Rashawn Jackson has here, but more because if it's intended to be race, Rashawn, I want you to put it back up there and say that. But this is more about the right, the conservative viewpoint or the Republican perspective. And we're going to get to the other question that you had about separation between.
That's the one I always love.
Yeah, we're gonna deal with that one. But the entire American political system skews right.
I don't know how to address that, because I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not.
I think it depends on where you're at. When you look at federalism, it depends on the administration, how long one party's been in office. It's a state issue. Texas, 100%. Here in Maryland, absolutely not.
Yeah, and it's even when you get Roe v. Wade, and I heard a lot of people locally speaking from a local perspective, because they didn't really understand that the undoing of Roe v. Wade did not impact Maryland, because Maryland has legislation that protects the right to have an abortion. And to me, because that's my biggest issue with the electorate, is the uneducated voter.
Correct.
And I think that's why we see the cycles that we continue to see. But let's get to this next question. And I know you mentioned something towards it about not being from a theological perspective as it pertains to his system of governance, but that conservatism has its roots in biblical principles. Talk to us about Rashawn's point about the separation.
So that's a fallacy that has never existed. And so separation, you got to go back to the First Amendment. The First Amendment doesn't give us any rights. All it does is constrain the government. And so the government can't make laws that establish any other religion at a federal level. We just escaped that from England. In fact, the 13 colonies in the first 13 states had state laws. And so there is no separation of church and state. The comment was made in a letter to the Danbury Methodist Church in up north, 11 years after the First Amendment was ratified. And it wasn't mentioned again by a judge until the 1950s. It's a new concept historically. But again, what is the separation of church and state? We lament our prison systems, and yet we try to send as many Bibles into them as possible, while at the same time trying to fight to take the 10 Commandments out of courtrooms. And so there's a dissonance, a disconnect here. And as people mature, most of us tend to become mellower, I hope, and more grounded in things that we never understood as we were young. And so there is this separation of church and state. Again, this Christian nationalist term that's being thrown around now, I got to chuckle, because every time I read a paper about it, it's basically a hit piece on Christians. But it always says in there that we don't seek to establish a theology. We just simply want laws that are based on morality. If you're not a Christian, I always challenge non-Christians, tell me what your standards are, so that
that's exactly where I was about to go, because the comments, it came in the comments as well, that when we're talking about Christian values and things of that nature, that when Barack Obama became president, there had to be some semblance of Black people's understanding that he was president of the United States, not the president of Black people.
Correct.
And we got some. I have some things. Let me talk about me. Sure. As a person who is in Black Baltimore, who came up in poverty and things of that nature. I have a perspective for which I view things that are associated with politics. Because when Malcolm X said Plymouth Rock didn't land on us, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. Plymouth Rock landed on generations of my family.
Sure.
And those institutions and how they critically traumatized and wounded my family. For me to be the first generation to do so much in my family, when my family has been here for such a long time. When we're talking about governing and having to, as the Word of God says, be all things to all people, where does that consideration come for the person that's not particularly a Christian when you're in that space that you are holding a public office?
So when I was running, I would get asked, because I carry a Bible everywhere I go, I get asked, hey, you're a Christian. How do I know you're not going to apply your Christian values? And I would always say, well, I can assure you that I will always apply my Christian values. The beautiful thing about this is I have a standard, and it's this: you, even as a non-believer, can know where I'm going to fall and can hold me accountable to these things. And I think that's really important. There were 5 other candidates. No one knew what their standards were, because they never talked about them. Again, what is the standard for marriage?
When you look at what happened in the Baltimore City State's attorney's race and what happened in the Schultz Cox race, do you see there being more of a shift towards value-based voting? Because to me, I think that's one of the things that's being overlooked, where you have this guy, Ivan Bates, who appeared to be the non-starter in the campaign because everybody that likes sexy headlines was making it a fight between 2 people. Right. Or 2 candidates. And here you have on this guy come through really. And when I talk to most people who voted for him in the primary, it's about standards. We're tired of corruption. We're tired of this.
Correct.
And then, of course, there were so many people that's associated with conservative politics in Maryland that were outright shocked that the legacy of Larry Hogan didn't get Kelly Schultz the nomination. And here
Correct.
comes Dan Cox, this guy who's vilified primarily for his association with. Do you feel like the voters, the electorate is starting to make more of a value-based voting system?
Yeah, I think we see shifts, patterns, always trends, ups and downs, and I think we're in that period. We've just come through. When you have discussions daily, there's pre-COVID, post-COVID. That's how historical what happened was. And so I think we've seen things. So school systems is a great example. Parents have finally woken up to what's happening in the schools because they weren't busy at work taking them to games. They actually watched them online and saw for the first time, unfortunately, what they were learning. And so I think by and large, that's a really good grip of what I think everybody's seeing and what's important to them.
Go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
No, go ahead.
Let's shift to the conversation because I just looked at the clock. This hour is flying for some reason, and I'm enjoying the conversation. But let's shift to the conversation that I know we all want to have, and Rashawn has been provoking so much of the conversation. Let's have this conversation about a candidate, a Dan Cox, being a gubernatorial candidate in the state of Maryland. Okay, right off the top, there's vilified for the Trump Association.
Sure.
And I'm hoping that we can get him to come on the show, so he can speak for himself. But when we're looking at this, right, because a really good friend of mine named Kelly, she got in the comments about the initial announcement and said a vote for Cox is a vote for freedom. Talk to me about Dan Cox. We had the conversation about Westmore, and I believe you spoke as a voter looking at a candidate.
Yeah.
As a voter looking at a candidate. Talk to me about Dan Cox.
Well, let me go back to West for just a second. One of the things I think we're really missing, I don't think Wes is a bad guy. I don't think he's nefarious. I don't think there's anybody that's propping him up. And he, because so much of media wants one side to think that about the other and the other about the. I see a good-looking guy with a family. He served his country. He started a nonprofit. We can ask legitimate questions about stuff. Now, to Dan, here's why Dan is a vote for freedom. In a conservative value, I want you to make your decisions, but I also need you to be accountable for your decisions. The accountability component in this is completely lost in America anymore. And so that's the heart of that's what the heart of freedom is. And so Dan will fight that your church. He doesn't want the government in there. He wants to help you. He wants to help the schools. And I would suggest from a Baltimore City perspective, you've got complete party control. Nothing's changed. Why not take a chance? And I'm not saying vote for Dan. I'm saying move beyond the headlines and reach out to him. Meet some of his supporters, kind of like we're doing now. I stood with Dan in the front line and was part of a lawsuit against the governor to open churches. Who else did that? Dan did it at great cost. He was actually threatened. And so he's a process guy. And what I mean by that is he wants to correct the laws. Instead of making so many laws that constantly have to be gun control, you talked about this a couple of weeks, is a great example. How many gun laws do we know to know that it's not the law, it's the man's heart, and where we have the answer for that?
Yeah, don't touch my guns.
Yeah. And so Dan is going to support that. And so he's a constitutionalist. His father was a pastor. His wife's father was a pastor. Dan's a deeply faithful man. But he's a conservative.
All those things becoming lost in places from your perspective, because we have identity politics. We have we're in the generation of the hashtag, the age of the narrative. Are good, solid people with good, solid values being lost in that space when it comes down to what do you think is the cause of that?
Yes, I think it's a couple things. I think the two biggest lobbyists in this nation, because everybody hates lobbyists, but nobody wants to acknowledge this, is the Democratic and Republican parties. They're the beneficiary of all the levers of power in this nation. That's what I'm saying. There's a political class. The challenge is we only care when it's the president, but by the time it's the president, it's too late. What's fascinating about this gubernatorial cycle is you got Wes, who's a new person to the table, and that's good, could be bad. And you've got Dan, who's I believe a first-term delegate. And so you have no deep political roots here from a party perspective, not philosophically, but from a UO people. And to me, I take hope in both candidates because as a political guy, I kind of thought that Francho, I thought Perez was going to be number one because of all the juice he brings to the fight, but he didn't seem to run a race. Francho started early, a lot of name recognition. Wes was kind of the dark horse in third place. And so I think, again, back to your point earlier, voters are kind of waking up. But again, the most powerful positions in government is your your county central committees, your county councils, and your school boards. Both parties use those as field teams. That's where that's your AAA ball.
That's always been one of the points of argumentation for me, is that we have a tendency to get all amped up about, national politics. Baltimore looks like Baltimore looks because of City Hall.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think it was Calvin Coolidge was a pastor. And when he was a congressman, he made a speech where he said, listen, if you want to see the character of the American people, look at its Congress. I've never forgotten that statement. And so, that's up and down. That's not just the Congress. That's your City Hall in Baltimore. That's our state capital in Annapolis. Look at it. They represent us because we put them there. Now, the challenge many will say is, why don't I have more choices? Now, I'm an independent. I couldn't even vote in the primary like you couldn't, Marvin. That's a little frustrating.
Yeah, that
doesn't mean I couldn't get out and sign wave and vote and get knowledgeable and help candidates that I want to help. And
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
We are waking up, and I think people are getting, Moms for Liberty. They're calling them an alt-right. They're not. They're actually bipartisan. I know several chapters of them, and there's a lot of Democrats. Kids are not partisan. Education isn't partisan, and we got to get past the partisan stuff. Rashad, I don't know on that. I'm a proponent of a flat tax, candidly. Again, we're doubling the IRS while at the same time we're giving them a lot of money to modernize. Yeah, you'll have to ask him. I believe he thinks they're, I can't use the word stolen, but we all support protecting voting rights, and we all believe that voting should be as safe as possible.
And you want to know what I believe? I believe having such a great need for mail-in ballots presented a great opportunity.
Well, but again,
for things to go however they was gonna go.
Yeah.
I ain't saying nothing was stolen. I said, but the fact that for the first time in a long time we had mail-in ballots. I was looking at a documentary. One of the most fascinating elections to me is the Bush-Gore race,
right.
And what Florida did in that time and in that race where it had been declared, because that was kind of the awakening for me as a young person in America who was just kind of starting to pay attention to what the privilege or the right to vote really was about and how powerful and impactful it can be. Because I don't think there's ever been a closer presidential race before or since, where it came down to that one state. This last one was just interesting to me. But, like I said, an empowered, educated electorate is going to be the key to being able to deal with a lot of stuff that we want to deal with. You've been with us tonight, Tim. We're going to have you back because there's still so much more to this conversation. And listen, I ain't never scared. I ain't never shaken at all, because I don't believe, and Shaka, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe in the 2+ years that this show has existed, that we have had the privilege or the opportunity, to be able to bring such well-rounded programming. And again, I'm not saying that we here to endorse Tim Walter's message or Dan Cox.
Correct.
But the one thing the Chop Shop is going to do is it's going to present a platform for people to be able to speak. And I don't care from what perspective you want to speak. All perspectives, as long as they're respectful and educated, are going to be welcome on our platform. So, Tim, we thank you. Can you give us within, I guess, about 45 seconds to a minute, your closing statement?
Yeah, let's just have discussions. It's okay. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm simply telling you why I'm voting the way I am. And I think we got to get back to that. Again, I think Wes is a great guy. I never tell somebody and attack their candidate. I can only tell you why I'm voting for mine. And I think that everybody by and large should do that.
Yeah, I think that eventually we'll get to possibly have hopefully both, because I haven't had a chance to reach out to Dan Cox, but I have spoken to representatives of Westmore, and it was a rather close person that I had the privilege of being able to reach out to. And if they don't think we too small time, maybe they'll come sit down and have the conversation. Well,
I talked to Dan's daughter, and so Dan is interested, and he will be reaching out to you.
Sounds awesome. Sounds up. Don't make it. Hey, Shot, come on the screen, Shot. Shot, you know how that one goes, Shot. If he come, he gonna put pressure on his homeboy. He gonna put pressure on West to have to come through. Come on, Dan Cox. Come on. Come on, the Chop Shop.
Great.
So, Shaka, that's not my church, by the way.
Oh, I tagged the wrong church in. That's my fault. I tagged the wrong.
That's okay.
Why you ain't up? No, that's not okay. We want to make sure people know where they can find you.
That's all right.
People where they can find you at, Tim.
So I'm the pastor of Grace and Truth Church. We're a small community church located in North Linthicum. We're right near G&M Restaurant, world's famous cracker cakes. We're right in an industrial park, small church, family, community. You can always get a hold of me. And so
Tim, I want to come to worship with you one day, man. We've had a lot of good, powerful conversations. I want to actually, and I'm committing on the air that we're going to figure out some sort of schedule where I can come and worship with you and your congregation, because regardless of where you sit on party lines and all of that sort of things, and I know you're nonpartisan, you are conservative. I've gained a great deal of respect for you because you like truth and you respect truth above everything else.
Everything.
And that's really important to me. That's a core value of mine. I'm never going to manipulate the truth to be associated with anything or anybody. Thank you so much for being with us today, man. We are definitely going to have you back. I'm literally going to look at some dates for the coming month because I want us to be able to continue to have this conversation as we approach the general election in November. Shock, as always, I thank you for rocking out with me, man. You make everything happen, the magic behind the scenes, even the wrong church, because it's my fault.
Listen. It's production. I'll eat that just because you the host. You ain't supposed to eat none of that. I got that. That's on me. I was supposed to double check that, Marvin, make sure that was that.
In fairness to your viewers, Shaka, it was my fault. I should have sent it. They asked for it, and I didn't send it. How's that?
Yeah, we all take a little bit.
Hey,
one team, one fight.
Listen, a pastor, check the private chat.
I got it.
Outstanding. Yeah, because we're having my organization Pit Fights. We're having a gubernatorial battle rap debate. Our second one. We had one with Jealous and Hogan. So it's a personification. So I have two battle rappers. One's going to be battling as Cox. One's going to be battling as West, presenting their platforms. So
that sounds wild.
So yeah, I'm gonna hit me up and we're gonna talk about it.
Okay,
that's awesome, man. And Tim, if you decide you want to check it out, I'll jump on the boot with you, man.
Oh, I don't have that kind of skill set.
No.
I said if you want to come check it out, come witness it.
Yeah, I need to come. Yeah, no, you're personally invited, Tim, but you're personally invited.
And as always, I gotta thank my listening audience tonight, Mr. Rashawn Jackson. I have not had the privilege or pleasure of making your acquaintance, but I thank you for coming in, man, coming strong and being passionate about your views. Yep. It's all welcome here, y'all. This is an opportunity for us to have a conversation. In so many places in the world, that one thing is being stifled, but not here on the Chop Shop. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. Come through and speak your piece. As I always say in closing, I want us to make sure that we are following the truth of God, that we trust in God with all our heart, lean not to our own understandings, in all our ways acknowledge him, and he will direct our path. Make better where you are. If you in Baltimore, if you in Baltimore County, you in Randallstown, be the change that you desire to see right there in the place that you call home. It's one thing for us to have aspirations that are outside of where we call home, but fix home first, and I promise the rest of the world will change. And above and beyond anything else, always remember that we can be more. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.